Joining me now is John Kirby, the National Security Council Coordinator for Strategic Communications. Great to see you this morning, John. Let's start by telling us how Brittney Griner is doing.
Well, she's at San Antonio at the Brooke Army Medical Center getting appropriate both mental health care as well as physical health care, just to make sure that she's ready for her reintegration back into American society. And they'll work that out with the doctors and the family as to how much longer she'll need to be there. But our initial reports are she's in very good spirits and in good health.
That's great news. So tell us about the final days leading up to her release. The U.S. acknowledged in July that it had made a substantial offer to Russia.
That's right.
You said this week to NPR that in our minds, the proposal would get both Brittney and Paul Whelan out. What does that mean, in our minds? Was a specific offer made to the Russians, you give us Viktor Bout, or we'll give you Viktor Bout, you give us Whelan and Griner?
Well, without getting into the specifics of it, because we are still negotiating for Paul Whelan's release, there was a very serious, specific proposal made to the Russians to try to get both of them out together. And it just didn't land anywhere, didn't go anywhere with the Russians. And then as we progress through the summer and into the fall, again, the conversations ongoing with the Russians, it was clear, Martha, that they were treating Paul very separately, very distinctly, because of these sham espionage charges they levied against him. And then it kind of came together last week in the end game with just a boot for a Griner deal.
So at what point did you lose hope that you wouldn't be getting Whelan out?
I think it really occurred to us that there was just no chance of doing it last week.
Just last week?
Just last week,
you thought there might be?
Because we've been trying all the way up until the moment where we actually secured the deal that got Brittney home. We were still trying to get Paul out.
And Paul Whelan spoke to CNN shortly after Griner's release was announced. This was his message to President Biden. Let's listen.
This is a precarious situation that needs to be resolved quickly. And I would hope that he and his administration would do everything they could to get me home, regardless of the price they might have to pay at this point.
Regardless of the price they may have to pay. Your response to that?
We're going to keep trying as hard as we can, Martha. And this business of getting wrongfully detained Americans home, there's nothing easy about it. And there's very rarely moments where it's just an aha, okay, got it, that's easy, that's a no-brainer. It's hard work, and there are tough decisions that go into it. This was one of them, too. Letting Mr. Bout go free 6 years early, that was not an easy thing to do. So we're going to keep working at this, and the president, as he has demonstrated
what can
clearly...
you do? I mean, who else is held? I mean, they wanted a German prisoner?
There was a claim that they wanted a man named Mr. Kraskov that the Germans have held in custody, who is an assassin. And as I said at the time publicly, that just wasn't considered a serious offer. How can we get involved in that when he's not in our custody?
But are there people in the U.S. who they want, Russians?
Again, I don't want to negotiate in public. They hold Mr. Whelan differently because of these espionage charges, and so we're working through that now. We are now more informed. Clearly, having gone through this process over the last few months, we're more informed. We have a better sense of the context here, where the Russians' expectations are, and we're just going to keep working at it.
And you talked about Viktor Bout, a lot of criticism, and let me give you some more from Democratic Chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee, Robert Menendez. We cannot ignore that releasing Bout back into the world is a deeply disturbing decision. We must stop inviting dictatorial and rogue regimes to use Americans overseas as bargaining chips.
He would have gone free anyway in 2029. He wasn't serving a life sentence.
It's a long way away.
It's 6 years away. And nobody's doing backflips over there about the fact that Mr. Bout is a free man 6 years earlier than he would have been. But we're going to protect our national security. And if Mr. Bout decides to go back to his previous line of work, then we're going to do what we need to do to hold him accountable and to protect our interests.
Your critics just say you just weren't tough enough. You have to stand up to these people to get detainees released.
Then I understand the criticism. They weren't in the room. They weren't on the phone. They weren't watching the incredible effort and determination by Mr. Carson's and his team to try to get both Paul and Brittney out together. I mean, in a negotiation, you do what you can. You do as much as you can. You push and you push and you push. And we did. And this deal we got last week That was the deal that was possible. It was the deal we could get now. Now was the moment we could get it, and we executed it.
Secretary Blinken described both Griner and Whelan as political hostages. U.S. policy is to make no concessions to individuals or groups that take an American hostage. This includes denying ransoms, prisoner releases. Why is the policy different for foreign states who detain someone for political purposes?
These are wrongful detained Americans, and as we've made clear, we're going to continue to do everything we can to get them home. The argument about encouraging hostage-taking, we understand that argument, which is why the president, since he became president, has put in place accountability measures to make it harder for people to do this for political purposes, sanctions and visa restrictions. We've also now started a new designation on the State Department website. So if an American's traveling overseas, go to that country on the website, see what the detention risk is, so you go fully informed. But know this. Even if you do everything right and you go fully informed and you still make that trip and you get detained wrongfully, the United States isn't going to forget you. And if we have to make tough decisions to get you back home, then this president's willing to do that.
And all of this, of course, was with the backdrop of the war in Ukraine. Give us your assessment of what's happening there now. We heard Vladimir Putin talk again about nuclear weapons, but saying, I'm not crazy, I know what nuclear weapons do. What do you believe his state of mind is at this point and what he's looking for?
It's difficult to know exactly what he's thinking on any given day, and it's a fool's errand to try to get inside that brain. What we do is we judge him by his actions. And what we see on the ground is a man who is determined to continue to prosecute this war against the Ukrainian people. Indeed, to make it more about them than it is even right now about the Ukrainian armed forces. He's hitting civilian infrastructure, knocking out the lights, knocking out the water. He's militarized the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. He is trying to bring the Ukrainian people to their knees as winter approaches, which is why just Friday we announced even more security assistance going to the Ukrainian armed forces so that they can continue to win back their territory.
And a senior official in Zelensky's inner circle told ABC News that it was Ukrainian drones that struck airfields deep inside Russia. Is that something you think they should be doing?
I'll let the Ukrainian armed forces speak for their operations. We are not certainly not encouraging or enabling Ukrainian operations inside Russia. We are trying to make sure that they can defend their territory, win back their ground in Ukraine. And from the very beginning, Martha, we've talked about monitoring and being mindful of the risks of escalation of this war, because that's not only not good for the Ukrainian people, it's not good for our interests, it's not good for the Russian people.
Okay, thanks so much for joining us this morning, John. Always good to see you.
You too.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.